It's on there.
We're live now. So if you guys want to take a quick second to, if you're looking at it from your phone, you ought to be able to hit start button, I believe, or copy. You can copy the link onto your Facebook page to start a watch group, I believe.
How do you do that?
Well, I mean,
is this
so
or we just hit the little icon of watch party or something?
yeah, that should work.
You can also hit copy link.
Where is it at?
So hit share, the share button, copy link.
Okay, I'm not getting to that point. I'm on the website and I got
Well, I'll go to your page and paste the link on your page, Judge.
so I don't have to do anything.
Nah, I got you.
Right on.
I got you. It's on you now, Judge.
Okay.
All right, look like LJ might have temporarily got kicked off, if that's right. So I'll get us started until LJ gets back on. So welcome everybody. Today's hot topic is criminal justice reform, and we got some wonderful guests. And so I'd like to introduce Nick Navarez. Nick, tell us about yourself.
Yes, sir. Nick Navarez Jr. I'm an attorney that's based out of Amarillo, Texas. We have 5 offices across the state of Texas. I'm originally from Graham, Texas, and came back to Amarillo after I lived in Buffalo, New York with the law school there. But my primary practice areas are in federal law, on the immigration side, state law, on the criminal side, a little bit of federal criminal side as well. So I'm happy to visit with you guys about the criminal justice reform, some of the things I think that do need to change in the criminal justice system. So if you want to start there or just want to continue with introductions, you guys let me know.
Okay. Thank you. Cal Dwayne Corley Jr., he has returned. Introduce yourself, Cal.
Hello, Cal Corley Jr. or KJ, or if you follow me on Twitch, Twitchy5. Average streamer on Twitch and Facebook. Strong supporter for people of color. Honored to be back. Talk about criminal justice reform and things that need to change for us in this systemic country that we're living in.
Thank you, KJ. Returning also is Judge Thomas Jones.
Once again, thanks for the invite. I'm really appreciative to be once again among such distinguished and knowledgeable folks in terms of this subject, this topic this evening. So it's an honor, first of all. But I'm glad to be back. Hopefully we can spread some information that will be beneficial to the community regarding this criminal justice reform, which is truly a hot topic right now. So hopefully we can be a learning experience for all of us. So just glad to be back and be among you.
Welcome back, Judge. And last of our guest panel is Constable Adela Jackson.
Yes, I'm excited about being a part of the panel as well. I appreciate Marlon inviting me. I will bring to the conversation a pretty unique perspective coming from a female law enforcement officer of color. I am the constable of Hardy County Precinct 4. I represent the northwest side of the precinct, and I'm excited about being part of this. A lot of people are not aware of what a constable duties are, and I explain it on a daily basis while I'm out in the community because people are not accustomed to seeing constables with marked vehicles. But we're mostly responsible for not only the civil part of the law, but we also do the criminal part. A lot of times people drive by and see our units and they think, well, can they pull us over? And yes, we can pull you over and we can give you tickets as well. Now, we are peace officers for the state of Texas. We are law enforcement officers, and a lot of people are not aware of that. Prior to me becoming elected 8 years ago to the constable's office, I worked at the Party County Sheriff's Office and was a deputy there for about 7.5 years. And prior to that, I worked at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and that's the prison at Bill Clements unit. I did that almost 12 years. So I have a pretty unique perspective to bring to the table. And I look forward to talking with you guys and having this conversation. And I appreciate you guys inviting me once again.
So just like we always do, we just jump right in the middle of it. So just to get the conversation going, why is this an important topic to you guys? Why is we've been talking a lot about the funding that we are reallocating funds from police departments into other behavioral specialist positions. Why is this important and an important topic? Why is this an important topic? Ms. Constable Jackson, you want to start us off with that?
I will. And it's very important to me as it relates to policing. I am a firm believer in police reform. And in order for people to understand, people got to know what reform really is. And actually the reform, it is considered to aim to transform policies and culture and just different practices that law enforcement engage in. And that change will ensure that police officers are conducting themselves in a respectful manner and also not violating any civil rights of any individual, as well as any corruption that's going on. So it is definitely needed as it relates to police reform. And the times we're living in, we're definitely in need of that. So
yeah. KJ, what's your thoughts on that same question?
It's very important that it's reformed. One, we're seeing the division that it's bringing just in our country alone, and the division that it brings between us as people that are striving to live together for one common goal, which is just to, move forward and live in peace and harmony in this country. And I think for me, one thing that I see a lot of people wanting to debate with me about is, the whole defunding the police thing, which from my understanding, from what I've been told from another officer as well, defunding doesn't necessarily mean abolish or get rid of the police. And I think that's what everybody thinks. Well, if you're going to defund them, if you're supporting that, then don't call 911 and all this kind of stuff. But if we're able to reallocate some of those funds to other places in the communities, I think it would help alleviate even some of the crime that we see, because some of the crimes that we see that happen, the little misdemeanors, the little petty thefts and all that kind of stuff, are just from lack of funding in certain communities. So I believe if those funds are reallocated and put to better use in other places, to clean up some places, to put businesses or, things to do for children, instead of them going out to go look for trouble or get into trouble, give them something productive to do around in their communities, in their home communities, that they don't have to travel all the way across town or travel to a whole nother city to do. They can feel at home and feel included and not like outcast in the place that they live.
A very good point. And from your position as an attorney in the area, Mr. Navarez, what's your perspective on the same topic?
I believe reform is necessary in the criminal justice system, for sure. I think a lot of the problem when it comes in the criminal justice system is that the individuals who are in the system don't actually have a voice, or the individuals, many people do not know what's going on in the criminal justice system because they don't have someone, or they don't know until they're actually involved within the system, whether with a family member or themselves, then they understand, wow, this system is not really working, or there's some things or improvements that need to take place. just being truthful, individuals of color, they typically know what more about the criminal justice system because of the family members or themselves that are going through it, as compared to other people within the American life. So it's something that I think the more we talk about, the more we educate people, the better we can get about reforming it. It's like the constable said, how can you reform something you know nothing about?
Yeah. Thank you for that, Mr. Nevarez. Judge, what's your perspective on the same topic?
Well, if we look at terms of criminal justice reform, we're having to reform a system that's been predicated to the destruction and the demise of communities of color from the end of the Civil War. The 13th Amendment, once the 13th Amendment was, which all slaves were considered free, with the exception, unless you were a criminal. And then you would lose all of those rights as a criminal. You would lose all of your rights. And so when we talk of criminal justice reform, from that point up until today, you look at it being a source of economics. So how do we go in and undo this system that provides an economic system for one of the turning points of this economic system that we have? Because under this criminal justice reform, we find we have probation and parole. We find that we have a bail system that's totally inadequate today. In some cases, bail being used as punishment, all the way to the incarceration of probably, I think over this country, we're probably well over 2.3 million people that are incarcerated or either on probation or parole, some aftercare system in this country. And a large percentage of that being people of color. So I think, and don't throw in the issue that we have with the school to prison pipeline. So it's a broad, general reform that's going to take, to me, a strong body. It's going to have to drive us to the polls in November, just to begin to start attacking this huge, massive criminal expansion system that we're having today. So it's going to be a long road because there's so many variables that are involved in it.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up about the bonds and fees and how that's used for punishment. So I like to start there because there's a lot of, I got some personal, some friends that has got caught up in that and it really impacted their life. They wasn't able to pay the fees, started off with simple traffic tickets. They lost their driver's license, get pulled over again. So let's just start up there. How does those bonds and fees, plea bargaining fees, trial fees, how does that impact this whole system?
Oh my God.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
Anybody can just jump on that one. I know it's a broad question.
Well, I can just tell you right now, in terms of the bond, it's being set by a judge. Many times the arraignment stuff where many individuals can't pay their bond, so they're sitting in jail. They're more inclined to take a plea bargain, even if with the time to get them out of jail as soon as possible, even if it's a conviction on their record and now it's moving forward, just because they need to get out and provide. If someone can't provide, post a bond for them, that means that they either have the funds, they have the individuals, or families in need, and they can't use that money to get them out. So they'll take it. I see it all the time. I have clients of mine who are like, just get me out of here. I have to get to work. And I'm like, well, if we take a time served, it's going to be on your record. They're like, I don't care. I have a family to feed. So they'll take that knowing that it's dinging them just to get out and provide. And in terms of the fees, the attorney's fees, I mean, that's kind of it's a misnomer of what court appointment fees, all that sort of thing. That's really not correct because a judge can order in the plea bargain, or they can order that the individual pay back those court appointed fees. So you're not really getting an attorney for free. The judge will say, hey, I don't want to pass that buck on to the county. I don't want the county to pay for it. I want this individual to pay for it. And now this individual doesn't have to pay for court appointed fees on top of the fines that they're jumping into. So I'm not sure. I mean, to me, I'm like, we're holding somebody down repeatedly And we're only just going to keep on catching them, because if they can't pay this stuff, where are they going to go back? They're going to go back to jail. And at some point, when does it become a revolving door? How long will it take to actually rehabilitate somebody as to holding them down?
Well, I think in terms of the fees, my court, I probably set 90% of the bonds in Potter County. And my issue that I have is of those bonds, we're setting bonds on nonviolent offenders, in particularly misdemeanor offenders. These misdemeanor offenders oftentimes lose their job because of these fees, the bonding, 10% of the bond, roughly 10% of the bond. Most families can come up with 10% of the bond just on a whim. And so I'm hoping that the counties can go toward a system to where those possession of marijuana is under 2 ounces, or Class A misdemeanors of over 2 ounces under 4, misdemeanor nonviolent offenses of theft. Maybe those offenses can at some point be a cite and go. Just give them a citation and allow them to go, and then hold them accountable for the citation and the payment of the citation. Therefore, they're not losing their jobs. They're not out here struggling. These families are struggling now. So you're adding another struggle. So to me, those bonds, now when you get to felony bonds, that's a different story. Felony bonds, and particularly nonviolent offenders on felony bonds, I tend to recommend low bonds for them, but with all the concentration in the bonds on those repeated or continuous offenders, along with those offenders who seem to have a violent case, meaning anything aggravated, and any other of those cases would actually deserve, or their bonds are going to be significantly higher than someone with a nonviolent offense here in Potter County.
Judge, I have a quick question. In terms of, is Potter County doing anything to hold like any stats for COVID? A lot of individuals had bonds, and now during COVID, I've noticed a lot of my clients are getting PR bonds, personal recognizance bonds, and those individuals are still showing up to court. I mean, they're basically catch and release because we don't want to put them into jail. Is the county, or do you know if anybody's doing any sort of stats? They say, okay, these guys are not reoffending at the moment. They're still showing up. Because I noticed a lot of that has been increasing. Is that something we could do to maybe help reform that?
Yeah, when you talk about those personal bonds on, again, nonviolent offenders, and that process was in place prior to COVID. Prior to COVID, we were seeing a slight decrease in those, in particular Class B misdemeanors, who were tying up jail space. We got to remember, the Potter County Detention Center initially was constructed to contain a population of 85 to 90,000 people. Potter County is well over to probably 140, 150,000 people, depending. So we need jail space. And so we're not tying up or trying to get out of the process of tying up jail space for nonviolent offenders, in particularly Class A or B misdemeanors. But the issue that we have misdemeanors that are Class A and Class B. We get those, but they also have a felony. So the felony charge is going to kick it to another level in terms of someone who could probably get out on a personal bond versus someone who has a felony that's going to have to be, a bond is going to have to be set in that particular case. But to answer your question regarding COVID, I don't think there's any data out there right now because we're still in this COVID process where there's a spiked cases are increasing, numbers are increasing. I think we'll probably be about a year or two out before we can actually get some official data that will say, hey, look, this is what was going on during this COVID dilemma.
Yes.
I know as the constable, we deal with a lot of the Class C misdemeanors as well. And Class C misdemeanors are, tickets or whatever. And what we try to do if we run across individuals of that such, we'll bring them to court and attempt to set up some type of payment arrangement to where they won't have to go to jail behind a Class C misdemeanor. But what I have noticed is that a lot of those fees just pile up, and they are definitely unable to get out that rut, people of color and poor people, because when they miss the court days, that's an additional, added fee. So it's constantly piling up. There's no way these individuals can get out that rut. So what I've noticed is that a lot of the judges also require them to do community services. And I mean, you can do community services. It's not requiring you to pay any type of payment. You just get out there and put some time in, and get that off your record. So that's what I've experienced in that area.
So we're flowing with this, and first let me say sorry about that, guys. Right when we went live, my internet decided to stop working, but so I'm back. But kind of talking with that and flowing with it, I'm not sure about in the Amarillo area, but I know in small towns, they seem to have like a good old boy system. And talking about that in terms with bonds and stuff like that, who holds anyone accountable for that type of stuff whenever there is maybe some set of people aren't getting high bonds, but African Americans or people of color, their bonds are set, super high on certain things. Do you guys see that, or is there a...
We see it, and the good old boy system is live and well here in Amarillo, Texas as well. And those guys are not being held accountable. The only time they get held accountable is at the polls when it's voting time, and you guys elect your officials into those positions to make those decisions. So yes, we experience it here in Amarillo as well. And Judge, you might want to add some more in regards to that as well.
Well, yeah, but see, the thing about it is our system is so overwhelmed in terms of criminal cases. But what's actually creating a problem for us as people of color are violent offenses. Now, the violent offenses is sort of those offenses that's going to create a problem in terms of bonding, and it's really going to be out of a range of the average person who's a day-to-day worker. Misdemeanors, we're finally, after all of these years, begin to take a different approach, a different look at misdemeanors. But again, here in Potter County, probably one of our number one offenses is domestic violence. Our domestic violence cases in council that during this COVID, I noticed that there was a big increase in domestic violence cases during this COVID. Those numbers are increased, which means there's going to be an increase in bond based on the actual act or the report that I get. Some of those assaults are egregious, and so on an egregious assault case, we're going to have to go in and set a higher bond because me personally, I have to think in terms of a victim, and I also have to provide safety for not only for the community, but I have to provide safety for a victim and potentially a family. So those bonds are going to be a little higher. Now, good old boy system in a rural town, a rural area, of course, that's going to exist. And there's nothing I don't think that can be done about that. That's just the way it is. In rural areas kind of play by a different set of rules. They have a different ball game that they play because of the number of arrests that they have. You have some counties may have 10 arrests a week, and I'm pretty sure the arresting officer may know, or the judge, the magistrate who's magistrating that particular individual may know that person. So there's going to be some leniency. There's going to be some racial disparities as well. So all of those are tying into a rural versus a mid-city as Amarillo or even urban areas, which are your metro areas.
Right. I mean, we got to think these judges in the rural areas and in the big ones, the judges are elected officials. So they know who's going to vote for them. They know where the money comes in. And then they come in with their biases as well. I mean, they're individuals, they're human beings. I mean, I have some judges where I have one judge right now, he cannot stand DWIs. And so if you go in front of him for a second DWI and you say, hey, the first one was 10 years ago, their biases as well. I mean, they're 10 years ago, but he doesn't care. He doesn't care that it's 10 years ago. If he has a second one, you're like, well, I don't want it to affect him now because he has a CDL. He got his life together. That just like, no, he had his second chance. I won't take the deferred, or I won't let him move to something else. We need to keep him at that probation. We need to keep that straight probation. You have the conviction. It doesn't matter that it's going to affect an individual's livelihood. That's just that's his personal opinion. And others may have something when it comes to domestic violence. They're just against those kind of cases. So it's kind of, I mean, they're individuals, they're humans. Judges are humans just like we are.
Exactly. Mm.
With that being said, I mean, I guess when we're talking the criminal, when we're talking the legal system and whatnot, can an African American man, again, a Black man, receive a fair trial in 2020?
You know, that's first of all, we gotta rewind and say a trial. When you say a jury trial, if that's what you're thinking, probably 3% of all cases go to trial. There's not very many people that go to trial. So there's 97%, 95 to 97% of people plea out. And then of course, that's where the DA's office come in, or in some cases, the Amarillo County attorney as well for misdemeanors. But you know, that's where the disparity comes in, is when you have that pleading process. Because if I'm not knowledgeable about the system, then I can be taken and my life can be totally ruined for years. Mm-hmm. Meaning, in some cases, a first-time drug offender. If I bring him in and I say, "Hey, look, this case here carries 15 years," and you say, "I don't want that 15 years," and you being of color, "Look, I don't want that 15 years." You got to come back with me with another offer. Probably 2 or 3 months down the line, they come back and say, "Look, I got you 6 years. This is the best I can do. If you decide to go to take it this case to trial, you're going to probably get, in some cases, an all-white jury who may be tainted by not only your color, but by these type of offenses. And there you are, you're looking for that range of punishment to be extended." So that's where we come in, and we have to be really careful, because this system, as I explained a little earlier, is really complex, because then you're throwing in a court-appointed attorney, and you're throwing in this court-appointed attorney who's only being paid to plea you out. Mm-hmm. And he's being paid to spend probably the minimum amount of time that he can spend on a particular case. It's not going to be financially beneficial for him to go to jury trial.
Right.
You know, he's going to be paid $1,000, man, for probably a plea setting. Whereas a jury trial is probably going to push him into probably a 3 or 4 day process, depending.
That's right. And to piggyback on that, Judge, I mean, yeah, to do 90s, I agree with that. 95, 97% do go to plea bargains. I mean, that people plea out. So you got to think, for a misdemeanor, it's a court-appointed, they're getting paid $4 to plea someone out. If your hourly rate, your average hourly rate is $250. That's not much time, a little over an hour that you're going to throw into that case to go to discovery, check out, the evidence, and then negotiate on a felony. Even if you get 1,000, that's not much time to throw into a case. I mean, even if you go to a jury trial, it's still up to some of the judge. It is up to the judge's discretion as to whether they feel that you're entitled to every bit of those hours that you bill the court for. I have judges in some counties around here, I'm not going to name, but they're notorious for cutting my time. If I throw out there and say, "Your Honor, I pled this out." Like, I had this case dismissed, and I was like, "Your Honor, I pled this. I didn't plead it." Like, I ended up getting it dismissed, but I worked my tail off for this case. This is how many hours I worked into it, put into the case, poured into it to get it dismissed, and then the judge cuts my time.
Right.
Jackson,
you have something?
Yeah. I apologize, but in talking about this, minimal sentencing, I know it's been a big question. A lot of the conversations around the reforming, and so I just kind of want to know you guys' thoughts about the minimal sentencing.
The minimum sentence, well, I just kind of go, if it's all right, I'll go forward. The minimum sentencing, the reform is going to be tough on that end, because it goes back to those individuals like Judge talking about who do not have a voice. The 13th Amendment come in to do the minimum sentence in federal stuff. You're talking about people who can't vote. that, you know, because they have felonies. And so now, okay, they're kicked out of the system. They really can't vote. I mean, they don't have a voice in it. So who's going to pick up that torch and run with it? A lot of it is a backlog. They say that's why the minimum sentence was come in, you know, well, this is what we have to do to teach them a lesson, to try to rehabilitate, but it goes into the private ownership of prisons. You know, do they really want that much of minimum sentencing? I mean, those guys, you got to think they're sitting there going, we don't want criminals, but then on the other side, you look at their LLCs that they're members of or they have interest in, and they're owning prisons. So it doesn't really add up. They're making money on both sides. So for them, they don't want the minimum sentencing. If they do want, they want the minimum sentencing because they know someone's going to get them. That's where they're going to be at. They are at least they're going to make money for the X amount of years.
So I had a question. Just, you know, thinking about like the reforming of the, you know, judicial system and stuff like that. Because I know, I mean, it can be found, you know, the racism can be found everywhere. Like, would there possibly be like a process to try to reform, like which judges are selected for certain cases, or who's able to hold those places, you know, because like Congress people, you know, hold those places 30, 40, 50 years, and then their family moves right in and they could be coming from a racist background, you know, so it tends to stay at the forefront, you know, for years to come, and we, you know, can't get rid of it because it, you know, it's just a family thing that, you know, who might have owned slaves before, now, you know, they're the top politician or they're the lead judge over all these cases, and they're the ones getting selected for these type of cases.
Well, we just saw it recently when this regime, I'm not going to call it a regime, but, you know, is putting these federal guys in. They're in there for life. Those federal judges are appointed for life. So you're basically waiting for them to die off and come about. I mean, what it goes is we're supposed to be able to say, well, we want somebody on the federal side who's not affected by politics. They're there to do and follow the Constitution and follow the rule of law. The scary part is, like I said, if you have somebody that has some bias, they're there, they're set. That's why you see a lot of forums. When you see any of the, you know, you see a lot of time the Ninth Circuit in California, they typically more liberal over there in terms of the federal appointments. So a lot of times if you're going to start to challenge some of these cases or these statutes, you're going to start there because you know you're going to get a federal, you're going to get an injunction. And that injunction will keep it in place till it gets to the Supreme Court, as compared to like the DACA stuff when they were trying to fight against the deferred action. They purposely started in Texas, knowing Fifth Circuit is very conservative. They could win, and even though the injunction was there, they were trying to get it overturned every time to get the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. So to answer, I don't know. I don't know to answer your question. I don't know. I wish there was some sort of review of their, you know, case, you know, what their decisions are and stuff like that. We just don't have that. You know, it's not on the federal side. State side's a little bit different. You know, you can go vote anybody out if you actually get out and vote. But the thing is, that's always been kind of a problem. Get out and vote.
Yeah, and vote.
If I could regress back for a moment on the minimal sentencing and just add really quickly that, you know, in this minimal sentencing, the object of, we got, I stated a little earlier once on economics. And economics is, again, it's the driving factor. Prisons can't, in private prisons in particular, they can't profit if everyone that's in there get out and stay. So they're not pushing for minimal sentencing because minimal sentencing is not making any money for them. It's not a profit for them. So they want to get the medium to the maximum sentences they can get because that's profitable. If I can get you in here, and that's one of the big issues that I have with this system in terms of people of color, because once we get into that system, minimal sentencing or not, we are locked in. Because for one, once in particularly felonies, we get out, there's attorney's fees that burden is placed on our family. If we go in, we got to look at the management and operations of a prison. You have phone calls. There's someone who's contracted to profit from the phone calls. We have a contractor that comes in and probably contract to do some parts of the meals. the commissary. All this is big business. So when you talk about it, then you have businesses who have invested in the prison labor. We had a deal here, Levi Strauss. Well, Levi Strauss decided to close and went and decided to go into prison labor. Therefore, they can pay an inmate 50 cents an hour versus paying someone out here $13 an hour. So what you're looking at is the economics that drive this machine. And each section of this machine is not designed for minimal sentencing. The only minimal sentencing you're going to get more than likely is going to be on lower misdemeanors or your misdemeanors offenses. That's it. Once you get into that felony status, you're opening up to private corporations. You're opening up to all of these prisons. I think there are 7 within the Texas Panhandle. Those prisons got to remain at a certain capacity for profit. So, Brother Jackson, I hope that answered your question on minimum sentencing in terms of everything that's tied into that portion of criminal justice reform.
I like to see what also Constable Jackson, she looked like she had a lot of agreement motion, and I like to hear her feedback on it.
Yes, just listening to the judge talking about the prison system after working with that system for going on, like I said, 12 years. I definitely fully agree with what he said about the economic part of it. Clemens unit alone was tasked with the responsibility of making, they had a boot factory. They still had a boot factory plant. And they distribute boots throughout the whole state of Texas for prisoners. And so that saves that agency a whole lot of money, had to, go outside when they got the inmates to do the labor for them. So, I mean, just being out there working amongst that is just like a city, within a city. I mean, it's really an organization to where it pushes the economy. So they're going to ensure that they have the clients there to ensure that that work is being done. So.
Hey, Nick, you had mentioned something earlier about the plea bargains.
Yes.
So plea bargain fees versus trial fees.
Yes, sir.
I know that's something that you were kind of also want to talk about. Who sets them? And
It's county specific on the plea bargain fees. And so if you join a court appointment list, then you may ask the court coordinator, how much does this judge pay for a plea bargain fee? And they'll tell you, this is the judge. It's maybe 400 here, maybe 500. Some other judges 300. They set that. It's up to the judge.
right.
And so even within some counties, you may have different county courts within that county, and one judge will pay 400, the other one may pay 500, but it's a lottery in which one you get on.
Yeah.
And so that's something that's set by them. And then again, that can be passed on. It used to not be that way. But for a long time, it was okay, the county's going to pay the $400. We'll just throw 400 out there. That was it. Recently, I'm starting to see a spike and the judge is asking at the end, when you're playing your client out, are you working? When do you think you're going to be able to get a job? And at first you're like, okay, what's the judge wanting to figure out? Then you figure out, well, the judge wants to see if they need to go and order those attorney's fees, that 400 to be repaid back to the county. If your client's like, no, I don't have a job right now, I'm trying to get on my feet. Maybe they're being honest about it. Then the judge, sometimes you have to argue, like, Your Honor, my client is trying to get a job. However, adding on the attorney's fees is not in his or her best interest because they're trying to get going again. But that's again up to the discretion of the judge. Mm-hmm. And as compared to a trial, if you don't check the box saying it was plea bargaining, you go to trial, then you have to actually submit your timesheet to show that the amount of hours that you actually worked on the case, and whether it's getting witnesses, going over witnesses, going over discovery, getting expert witnesses, all that stuff. You have to break all that down, and again, it's up to the discretion of the judge whether they're going to go ahead and pay that amount or not.
Right.
Let me add this real quick, brother, because you mentioned that. Now, if the judge is good friends with a group of attorneys, then he's going to make sure his boys, his friends, his associates get the prime cases, those cases that tend to pay a little more. Then that's where that good old boy system will come in, and this judge is free. He's going to make sure. You got to remember, here in Parker County, there's some attorneys that live off the court-appointed system. Some attorneys are making well into 6 figures just off of court-appointed cases. That's strictly just playing them out. So they know who's going to get what case and how much that case is going to pay. and they can actually survive off this court-appointed system.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, sir.
So what areas can that be reformed when it comes to the court-appointed fees and the trial fees and plea bargain fees and stuff like that?
Well, see, what we're doing here in Potter County is moving away from a court-appointed system. The county is moving away, which would be Potter and Armstrong County. And what they're going to is more, it's a combination of a MAC, which is a managed assignment counsel / public defender. So with that, it's going to be there's going to be some accountability to hold these court-appointed attorneys accountable for the decisions that they make. Some of them are not picking up cases to 24, 48 hours prior to a hearing. So this managing assigned counsel part of this program, there's going to be a person who sort of like a manager that's going to manage this group of court-appointed attorneys to make sure that they are doing what they should be doing in that time frame that it should be done. On the other side, there's public defender. The public defender is probably going to move a lot of cases in terms of some of your felony cases. So Potter County is moving toward that, and you'll find now that most counties are going to gradually move to some form of one of the two to avoid lawsuits, because these lawsuits are really creeping up, and most people are winning these suits based on the counsel, court-appointed attorneys. So I hope that was the answer to your question that you had regarding that.
Right. Constable, did you have anything?
No, sir.
Okay, so almost moving away from the courtroom, we want to talk about the juvenile law. Basically, are juveniles are they getting the rehab, or are they just being set on probation and being set up until they're 18 years old to enter into the system?
Go ahead, Constable. You see it.
I personally don't believe that the system is geared to set up for their success. Caseloads for the juvenile probation officers are just loaded, and I don't believe that they have a system really fixed to ensure that the young people are successful once they completed that. It's like a revolving door. Occasionally, the judge and I hear those cases when they're trying to get their sentences or whatever suspended, and these kids been in and out the system, constantly, and they hadn't had no type of reform or anything. So I think it's geared for failure. We have to reform the juvenile system as well.
Okay. Did you have something, Nick?
No, the constable's right. I feel the same way about juvenile. Juvenile law for me is it's like my passion. I consider it like my pro bono case. I've been fortunate to have a lot of private practice. I've been fine there, but I purposely stay on the juvenile list in certain counties, in the surrounding counties. To me, I feel like they are being underrepresented. I know they actually have an attorney, but it is kind of the good old boy system on some level. It's a revolving door just trying to get these kids in and out. Some of them in some counties will stay on, they're 11-year-old kids, and now they're going on probation until they're 18. Who's not going to mess up from 11 to 18? I was an choir boy as a juvenile. And now we're sending these kids and we're saying, oh yeah, we're going to put you under that law. And then their argument is, well, if you do these things beforehand, then we'll go ahead and let you off. We'll let you off early.
Right.
But you need to complete these, then we'll let you off early. And they say, well, it's because we don't want to come back to the courtroom. And I laugh at that because I'm like, why can't you set this kid out for a year? Let him get rehabilitated, go to the classes. And then if we have to come back in a year, then what's the big deal? What's another year to come back in as compared to, I'm going to put you to your 18. And then to me, what does a kid do? So there's no, in my opinion, there's no motivation like a deadline. So if you put it for a kid, say, you got a year to complete this stuff, they're going to complete it, as compared to saying, oh, well, I'm on it till I'm 18. So what good does it do? And the fees are $20 a month. And also they have to sometimes pay attorney's fees. The parents are required to pay that, kids are required to pay that. So yeah, all that stuff on there. To me, you're setting these kids up for failure.
Right. Jackson, you have something? And then I'll get you.
Question for the panel. I just have a question for the panel. You know, when I first started childcare, you used to hear the statement made when parents were desperate with a kid. They were having a hard time managing them. And the parent used to get feedback about, well, if the kid hits the juvenile system, then they could get resources, right? So they were, when the kid would have a meltdown, they would request that the police be called to the home with the hopes that the kid eventually has done something to be sent to detention, and hence the falsehood about then they could access services begin, because there were not a lot of services within the community, or that they had knowledge that these services. I also believe that this same idea is in the school system. I don't know that that is the reason why police officers are in the school system. I did not go to school with any police officers in my school. And so my question is this, this school to prison pipeline that is also in the media, and schools inside, police officers inside of the school, where most people believe that there's a behavioral specialist. So my question is this, is there a legitimate fear for why there needs to have police officers in the school system, and that are they serving a positive purpose or a hindrance where kids are entering into the system for having mental meltdowns based on their traumatic histories? Well,
I'll take a chop of this lumber first. I have mixed feelings at sometimes with at different points in time when with police officers being in the schools. But again, I'm back to this thing of where we lack the Black male presence in schools. Again, I can recall, and when I was coming through, the football coaches, and I keep reiterating that the football coaches or the male teachers in the school were the enforcers. So to me, once you put a police officer in a school, then to me that's sort of started a law and order or militarization of the school system, because this is an armed officer who's able to pick and choose and use his judgment to determine who that he's going to deal with and how he's going to deal with them. So if I can hide behind my badge and really incarcerate or press the button on students of color, but I overlook white students, then, again, you're using it up to this officer's judgment of how he's going to deal with that based on the fact of the lack of male enforcers in a school. And that's going to, again, Brother Jackson, that's going to flow over into another discussion, another topic at another panel. But we have to get back to taking control of our schools by putting strong male presence in our schools versus the police, because the police department is only geared for one thing. They're only wired for one thing, and that's to deal with criminals. That's what they do. That's what they're trained to do. And I don't think that there you have some with a criminal mind. You have some out there that do, but that system will deal with them harshly or in another way versus an officer being there to handcuff them or introduce them to this process at an early age. And I don't think that's what we should be doing.
Well, I have a different perspective on it. In the times we're living in now, and I firmly believe that whether it's positive or negative, it all depends on the officer that you have at that particular location. With all the mass shooting, the active shooters, and everything that's going on in our society right now, have a lot of assaults going on in the schools. And I really believe that you had the right officers in that school that's making a difference. I think will really make a big change amongst those kids. But like the judge said, they are there, the officers are there for enforcement, pretty much, not only enforcement, but also protection. And we're living in days and times where that protection is needed in our schools. And that's just my perspective on it.
But you know, I don't think that there was actually a change, because I can remember being in, and I'm gonna use Horace Mann. I went to Horace Mann, and I went to Horace Mann during when there was really trouble and confrontational times. It was during the Roots sagas, and the Roots sagas brought a lot of pain, brought a lot of confrontation, and really put the school environment at risk. But there was not a need for the police officers to be there unless those riots got really way out of hand. In some cases they did, so that was good for a military presence. But when I say the military, the police department's presence there, but there were confrontations every day. But again, the strong teachers, the male teachers, were able to harvest that. They're able to round us up, get us all on one accord. And the teachers were the enforcers. They were the ones, and it wasn't, until there was something extreme that the police presence was necessary that we had them. So I just think that system worked, and I think it can work, but it can only work with the right people in the right schools at the right time.
And Judge, back in those times, they wasn't introducing those weapons into the schools as well.
We had weapons now. Weapons.
I'm talking about guns. And I think that's what the difference is on today's time, that kids not only coming in, but we have outside threats that's coming in with the weapons. And that's what I'm just considering. And I know. Go ahead.
I'm really the constable. I think we can kind of get in a happy medium though. That's where the community involvement, and who do these officers answer to? There's a reason, like in the juvenile law, they're under the Texas Family Code. They're not even under the Texas Criminal Code. So they're even treated as family. It's like a family marriage. So the family law. Right. So these kids, yes, we need protection for these children, and these officers, we need them there. Yes, on some level, but who are they answering to as well? Or are they just kind of this own little group answer? Because in their mindset, they're officers. That's that's what they're trained to do. So can we get a happy medium somewhere? We have, going back to what Judge is saying, that strong male presence or female or teacher presence, and they're saying, hey, we want a voice in this on how you're policing our children. Because ultimately, teachers who love their kids, they are like their kids. They love those kids like they're their own. So I'm afraid their voice may get lost if it's like, well, it's just because the officer liaison said that. Because I ran into a little issue with AISD because I found out, and it was under a different deal, but I saw the effects of how they were charging these kids. There were two schools in this area that were charging if a child got into a fight with another kid in juvenile, it was assault, it was disorderly conduct. That was it. But in two of the other schools, it was if the individual got in a fight with another individual, is disorderly conduct. But if his or her friend happened to jump in to protect or do something like that, they would call it gang affiliation. So you have two schools, two same crimes happening. At two schools, it was gang affiliation with the disorderly conduct. At two, it's just disorderly conduct. So how does that affect them as they're going on their future when it came to the immigration side? Because then those kids were getting kicked out of the federal system because they were deemed to be gang affiliated,
right?
Just because they happened to go to two different schools,
right?
Than the other ones. So to me, if we can have to
look at it, we have to take another approach and say, okay, for the last couple of months, we've been watching BLM, Black Lives Matter, and all those are young kids. Some of those are young teenage, early 20s, young folk who, and I believe if they're exposed to that form of brutality, because there are some officers who will really put the enforcement down on those young folk, and that will tarnish their mindset for years. So those are the ones, that's what we're out here protesting. That's why the young folk are out here protesting from that excessive form of enforcement, right, and in particular at a young age.
And that's where it go back to accountability. And like I said earlier about the integrity of the officer. I mean, you have those type of officers, they need to be held accountable for their acts. And again, like you said, Judge, that's why we have our young people out here with this Black Lives Matter deal to hold these officers accountable. I believe that every child in the system should be treated fairly, no matter what school they're attending. If they're on the north side, south side, west side, everyone should be treated the same.
Hey, I think we got Michael Mack. He has a question.
Oh,
Yeah, I had a question a few minutes ago, so we kind of went past that.
All right.
But no, it's good. LJ shifted the conversation to the juvenile system, but my question was still back on like the minimal sentencing. Just kind of to piggyback on that, if you guys don't mind, I would just like to know your thoughts on it. One of the things that we see as just an informed citizen is the gross disparities between sentencing for Black and brown folks and for their white counterparts for the same or similar offenses. So I want to know, just from you guys' perspective, what do you see changing about that, if anything is changing, and or what needs to happen to see real reform in that regard?
Well, I think there's going to have to be I think this sentencing guidelines back in the era of mass incarceration under, I think I want to say there was Bill Clinton's federal crime bill in 1994, where there was a difference in terms of crack cocaine versus regular powdered cocaine. Most Black folk dealt with crack, and therefore they were sentenced a little more harshly. They were taken advantage of, and they really filled up this mass incarceration era that we're in now. So I think to actually go back on the federal level, you're gonna have to go back and redo those mandatory sentencing guidelines. You're gonna have to go and restructure them to where, that 3 strikes you're out. That's kind of faded out, but the difference in now, which would be crack versus meth, and sort of, take the resentencing those different charges. So I think that'll be an actual start. But again, we're back to square one, where on the state, on the district and local level, that's just the judge's discretion of how much he has a minimum and a maximum. So how far does he want to go down toward the minimum, or but in terms of elected officials are elected on a tough on crime. So you're going to have to that's going to be a little touchy, but of course, it's who you vote in on every 4 years.
Yep. I mean, I see kind of just in the piggyback on that, I see it on the criminal defense side, the difference of how, like a controlled substance, prescription drugs, that sort of stuff. Individuals charged with that, typically what I'm seeing is they are white as compared to crack, cocaine, getting into that sort of stuff. It's people of color. If they're hit with a controlled substance, a lot of times I've heard it directly from a DA or from the judge saying, well, they need to be rehabilitated. We need to send them to classes. It's funny, like, well, what about the other being rehabilitated? Why is it that needs to be rehabilitated? That's a controlled substance. It's dangerous. It's just dangerous. Operating vehicles is something else. To me, that's something I'd like to always dig into. It's like that I see it overtly. It's funny how that's an okay drug, but this is not an okay drug.
well, what I've seen, I don't know if you guys had heard of it, but in 2018, Trump did sign a new law into act, and it's called the First Step Act. Have you guys heard of that one? Okay, and that pretty much reduces certain criminal penalties on it. So there's been a lot of federal charged inmates who've been released due to that particular act. So that's the only one that I am aware of that's been signed into legislation to address those issues.
Yeah, but that's on the federal level. On our state level, that's where that's where the masses of our people are in this state system.
Right.
So I mean, it's going to have to be a reclassification. That whole system is going to have to be just totally re-examined and restructured.
Right.
Going, sorry, Mac, about that, man. I didn't see your question, man. So, Jackson, you got something on that before we move on?
Well, I kind of wanted to, this was a really good portion of the discussion. And, one of the things I want to ask is we talked quite a bit about the economics of the privatization of prisons. We hit, and I think having police officers in the school, I believe that there's a lot of teachers and parents and kids that at this point in time, because of the mass shootings, they are fearful because of the lack. So my question is this: we, as a nation, as an advanced nation, we've done a really good job of criminalizing mental health. We have criminalized immigration. We have criminalized momentary or long-term poverty. And so I'd like to kind of know y'all thoughts on that. On
the criminalization of immigration and
poverty, homelessness. I meant to say homelessness.
Yeah.
And mental health issues.
And I'm gonna speak totally from Potter County's perspective. That's our number one issue. We have yet to figure out a way to address the mental health, and it's really sucking all of the funding from Potter County. And I'm only speaking for Potter County because I'm fully aware of what's happening with the mental health portion. But we are one of those counties where we're not preventive, we're punitive. So we're going to continue to incarcerate and time serve people who are sort of a revolving door. We have people who have mental health issues who will go to the same place of arrest, set that time out, get time served, and go right back to the place that they were trespassed from. Right now, we don't have a facility that's capable of handling mental health issues. Those people who have the insurance policies who can send their loved ones off to treatment, they're at an advantage. Which ties into the poverty part of your question, is those who don't have money, who don't have access to money, they're the ones who are really getting caught in really, there's no help for those transients who are out there whose family just can't afford to get them access to mental health treatment. That's $1 million question, Brother Jackson. That's a question that's gonna, I'm assuming an administration that's more that decide to put mental health issues at the forefront, and maybe some of those fundings will trickle down to on the local level. But until we get that, man, it's our jail is full of folks with mental health issues.
And I'd like to jump in on that, the mental health portion of it. I know with working with the Potter County Sheriff's Office, there's a lot of individuals off the street having mental health issues, and there's no facilities, there's no treatment centers available to address those. I remember times when we had to take them all the way to Big Springs once they've been diagnosed and actually been assigned to a place. I mean, you got to go through a process, and not everybody getting that particular treatment. So the only place you can take them to is the county jail. And when you talk about the defunding of the police department, I know part of our training is for us to take crisis intervention training, and I don't think police officers should be required to have to take that particular training. I believe mental health officials should be the ones mostly responsible for taking care of the mental health. So
Yeah, and just on the
go ahead.
No, I'm with you. You see what I'm seeing too on this side. On the criminal defense side, I see it as if I went to police someone and say, hey, look, they have a mental issue, they're having some mental problems, I have to convince, I have to file the paperwork, convince the judge, like, hey, we need to get this individual treatment or to get them some sort of evaluation. Well, that takes time. And criminal system, time is money on some level. So if you get into that individual sitting out there, how long are they sitting out there? I mean, I've had cases where the jail's actually called the judge and pretty much said, this person has messed with us, I'll use my, PG language, for X amount of days. This person probably is mentally not okay, but they're like, we can't handle this person. They're out of control. I've had a county attorney who's been like, no, I want to still punish this person. And a judge was like getting a call from the jail, and the judge calls miraculously, the case is dismissed, and this person is now back in the streets. Well, like Judge Jones said, what happens when they go back on the streets? They're going to go back to where they probably offended the first time. Now they're back in the system again.
Right.
It's, at some point, where are we helping these individuals? Is part just kicking the can down the road, or at least being able to shut that case, only be open at a later on, at a later time later on.
Exactly.
Yeah. This, just to kind of jump in, and this just kind of just the way my mind kind of works and sees things. Do we think that those are criminalized the way they are because mostly that the people that respond the most are the ones that are out to catch the police, they're out to catch criminals. So then those are the people that are called, those are the people that are dispatched to deal with those types of issues versus, hey, there's a homeless guy here. Can somebody come, get him? Or, my family owns dealerships. We work at a car lot, and we have a lot of transient people. They'll come, drunk or inebriated or whatever, pass out on the lot, and there's never a number to call just to come pick them up, take them to a rehab center or a place like that. It's always the police that show up. And I've seen in some cases personally, I'm not saying that he's out here breaking the law or doing any of that. He's just asleep on our lot. Customers have to walk around him, or, I just don't want nothing to happen to him, because we've had a few people fall asleep, during winter times, and they don't wake up the next day because they're asleep out in the cold. But I've seen some of the officers, but it's like they're instantly viewed as a criminal. They're handled roughly. They're not handled, just like somebody that's inebriated. And I think a lot of things that I've seen lately, I think it just goes back to just reallocating those funds to proper places, to where it's not, you can send trained people to deal with that kind of stuff, to get them up, check, make sure they're okay, make sure they're not injured in any kind of way, and then reallocate that person to the correct facility or correct place. But there's not even funds to have those kind of facilities. It's just, in Gallup, New Mexico, they call it the drunk tank, or I'm pretty sure that's a term thrown around. They just, hey, they're drunk, pick them up, throw them in there. And then I feel like that just causes a lot more problems, even from there. Like just the fact that the people that are responding are people that are out to catch criminals instead of mental health workers out to help mental patients, or, homeless facilities out to pick up homeless people, or, things of that nature.
So with that, KJ, and I mean, that's a good point. My question would be, is there an area, is there some type of way that, I know, we talk about defunding police and stuff like that. I mean, do we do mental health training with police officers, or do we hire those who are more equipped to deal with those situations that KJ are talking about?
Well, understand that part of police officers' requirement is that we do obtain that training. It's called crisis intervention training. Every peace officer in the state of Texas is required to receive that. And Mr. K, what do you say we can call you? KJ?
KJ's fine, yes, ma'am.
Oh, KJ. I understand what your concerns are, and unfortunately 99.9% of the time you get those type of officers. But our responsibility is to serve and protect. We're not always out to arrest somebody. We can help somebody get somebody where they need to be to get the help they need. That's part of our job as well. But the crisis intervention training that we're required to have, me personally, I don't believe officers should take on that level of training because we shouldn't have to deal with mental health. So I definitely agree with the reallocating the funds to individuals. So when we do show up, we'll have that individual we can call out to assist that person when they're in need. So.
Judge Jones, you have something?
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's going to fall under the umbrella of defunding the police department, because at that point you're going to have units, you're going to have specialized, trained folks to go out and deal with folks with mental health issues, and that's real broad. That's a wide range of mental health, from those diagnosed mental health cases to undiagnosed mental health cases. But we have to have a place of treatment. We can't just have a strictly, totally police enforced county or state where they're just taking folks in and expecting, the jails to deal with that, because there's a large amount of pressure that's placed on our jail system. And I don't think a jailer should have to just dealing with the issue of mental health issue without there being space. If this person is released, at least if he's getting some form of mental health treatment or attention, he should be able to continue that once he's released, instead of just turning him out to the streets. So again, that's part of, in my opinion, the defunding of the police to set a certain amount of funds that are allocated to mental health and mental health treatment, and also, mental health facilities that can hold a number of people to properly treat and diagnose and evaluate them while they're incarcerated and released.
Jackson?
Can I
Go ahead.
Just a little input. What I've noticed on the mental health, a lot of mental health patients, they're drug-induced mental health. And a lot of the drug-induced mental health, they're not getting the treatment. I know our county judge, they sign paperwork for them to get assistance, but if it's drug-induced, a lot of times they don't get that help. So a majority of our people that's walking around, a lot of their issues come from drugs, unfortunately.
True, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jackson, did you have something?
Yes, y'all know, because of the field, the career path that I've taken, mental health is very important to me because it has a direct correlation to kids that have interacted in child protective services and kids that access residential placement, such as the facility I work at. So early, we had talked about since COVID there's been an increase in domestic violence. And one of the clear indicators of a single traumatic experience that can lead to maladaptive behavior in children and youth is domestic violence. And so we also know that socioeconomically, there's more domestic violence because of the stress that's within low-income areas, which a lot of our Black and brown people are living in those areas. So to me, that really speaks about how the engagement would be with police officers and with the juvenile system and plus the judicial system. So what's your thoughts on that, on the impact of domestic violence, the impact on maladaptive behavior in our communities that leads us to engage in those systems?
I think we're starting to see the rise. It's going to happen, and I'm afraid it's only going to continue. I mean, we're going to have another spike. People are losing their jobs, add more stress economically, going with the poverty. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, now what are you going to do? Sit there and go, okay, now I'm missing a paycheck. I'm missing 2 paychecks. I'm not saying it's okay to have that, but I really feel like we're going to see a rise in that. And then who's protecting these children? And now we're going to have a bunch, and you guys in the education system, unfortunately, I think we've relied on you, not to say unfortunate in a bad way, but I mean, you guys have to take that on as an added job, I guess, requirement to help watch after these kids. And I mean, report if something's going on. And if these kids aren't showing up to school, who's to make sure that nothing's going on? That's what I'm concerned about now. How long is this crime going to be continued to, or will it continue to be occurring without any sort of call or rehabilitation.
But see, once again, it's back to, again, it's economics. It's back to a point where I think we should have more treatment facilities. We should have more. You shouldn't have to have a domestic violence charge to get some form of treatment, because I know in probation, most domestic violence cases end up as a probated case unless it's continuous. So part of the conditions of probation are, BIP, Batters Intervention Program, anger management, but you have to be charged with domestic violence to actually get access to that kind of treatment. So until we can get funding to have some kind of preventive treatment out there, that once those families are stressed and relieve that stressful impact instead of violently, confrontational, where a small child may witness a dad being drug out or going through the arresting process. That's a traumatic feeling and a traumatic emotion for some young folk, and particularly kids. So we got to get back and start thinking in terms of really helping people and having people have access to those resources that they need to prevent some of these family confrontations.
I guess my concerns is just with the COVID, and we're unsure what the school's going to be reopening. I guess my main concern is what would be the kids' outlet. You stated that schools are an outlet for them to, at least talk to a counselor and talk to a teacher. But if we don't resume the schooling, then where could those kids go to? I mean, they don't have that trust in the police, for one, and that was their outlet. So we're stuck in a dilemma where kids are just stuck. I mean, and no place to go. So that's my.
AJ, did you have something on that, man?
LJ, can I add to that question, if that's okay?
Go for it, man.
Oh, I appreciate it. So, one of the things that at the other day at the community meeting, and I really appreciate Constable Jackson, what you said is about comply and complain. I mean, so I think one of the mothers had mentioned that they don't know what to do. They don't know what the laws are. They don't know. And so if they don't know, then how can they guide their kids? And this is a whole community saying they don't know. And so my question is that ignorance in the true sense of the word, in the true sense, by not knowing, how is that impacting our Black and brown communities and they're engaging in the juvenile and justice system?
Unfortunately, the law say ignorance is not an excuse. You should know the law, but unfortunately, our people are not aware of the law. And it was so many of the young people talking about how officers is demanding to search their vehicles, and they didn't know that they have a right to say no. You're not required to allow an officer just to search your vehicle. And it just, odd how many people who are not aware of their constitutional rights. And so I don't know, it's just one of them things that we as the people, the one who do have the knowledge, got to do our best to educate them. And I have tasked myself with, that particular job. I mean, if you want the knowledge, Constable Jackson is available, and I can tell you all that I know. And if I don't know, I will definitely look it up and we will find it together. But poor communities and people of color, we just don't know our rights, and it's a sad thing. And I'm a type of person, I like to self-educate. When I don't know something, I'm gonna research and look for it for myself. But everybody don't have, that ability to do that research, or even that thrive to want to do it. So.
Just so even within the school system, unless I just wasn't paying attention in, my government classes and stuff like that, I don't even remember being taught, like what the amendments were, or like I said, unless I just, wasn't there that day or wasn't paying attention,
I wouldn't.
I don't I don't remember going over any of that, and I think classes that are set up or, even just in certain cities, I know Gallup, New Mexico isn't one of, the prime places to look for education or stuff like that. But, just like you said, like everybody needs to know it. I think everybody should be taught. Like, is there a way to like make sure, that that's part of a curriculum or make sure that it's being taught, or is there something, even outside of an educational facility that, that could be introduced, whether it's, because I remember even in fourth grade, we were learning about stocks and bonds and all that kind of stuff before we're learning about our constitutional rights or our rights and freedoms as a people. Like, I just feel like that's something that should be, that an emphasis should be placed on, because I think that's where a lot of people dig themselves into certain holes or make things worse for themselves just strictly out of ignorance of not knowing.
Right. Well, I know for a fact that in school, criminal justice classes are being taught, and they teach you your constitutional amendment, right? And that Fourth Amendment provides you the right to be secure in your person, and that person means your home, your papers, your vehicle, and all that. Free from any type of harassment. But that training, I mean, it is provided in school. Like I said, I didn't pick it up in school. I didn't obtain all that knowledge. So I got into college and started really researching it. So, but it is out there.
Well, I think at some point, maybe we should have political science as a requirement versus an elective. I don't think most students, most high school students anyway, they're not, I don't think political science is at the top of the list. So maybe our educators, maybe they can put that in terms of really, and granted, that's one of the things that I think our young folks should understand and become knowledgeable of, is the purpose for government and to break down the functions of local, county, state government, federal government. And so again, that's one of the issues that I think should be placed in our schools to become a requirement, so we can begin to educate those, and even in particularly on the voting process, and encourage them to get out and vote once they become of age. All those things kind of tying together, because our young folks are going to have to decide to step up and like the constable said, at some point, if they're not getting into school, they need to seek and search on their own. And that's where we're gradually moving to, is that kind of that political science, getting everybody politically engaged in the process.
I think that's part of us too, as well as adults, to educate others who are voting. I had this conversation this past week with an individual, like, they're talking about the defund the police. Why would you want to do it? And I was like, no, that's not what we're saying, take away the police. We're talking about maybe using these resources and allocating them elsewhere. But certain aspects or certain parties within this country, like, oh, defund the police. This is what they're trying to do. Let's scare them. Let's scare you. Fear is a motivational factor, like unknown. That's what they're doing by saying that. And that's on us, I think, is the young kids can step and educate. We want us to help the other voters talk about it.
And can I interrupt just a little bit? I see a couple of hands raised. I don't know if you guys noted that, but it looked like somebody want to ask a couple of questions. Do y'all see that?
Marcus, you got your hand raised.
Marcus, Marlon, and somebody on the iPad asked some questions.
That's Judge.
Oh, that's Judge.
I have my hand raised, but I'm good. The judge already answered the question that I had.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Marlon.
I think he stepped away.
Yeah. So we're getting, LJ must be having some technical problems. We're right at about 7:54. So we'll just kind of start the closing ceremony. So, just what are your final thoughts about the criminal justice system? Any final points that you want to make? We'll start with Constable Jackson.
Yes, and you guys, I would really like to go back. I reviewed you guys' video y'all had prior to this, and you guys talked about officers of color. And I just wanted to bring to the forefront, on my perspective, on having officers of color. I know a lot of the guys stated that they don't necessarily believe that having an officer of color would make a big difference. And unfortunately, I somewhat disagree. I believe that in a community, you have to have officers who look like the community that they're representing. And it does, it has to take an officer who is highly concerned with that community in order to properly police that community. But when individuals don't see anybody that look like them, I really feel that they don't think that that particular officer will have their best interests at heart. I think that if you don't have the same concerns, and one thing, if you don't even live in the community that you're trying to police, is not a good idea either, because a lot of officers that we have, even here in Amarillo, don't even live on the north side. I really believe my position, you know, as an elected official, I am in law enforcement, but I think I'm the only woman of color or even officer of color at all that live in the community that they serve. So me personally believe that it is important to have officers that look like individuals, because I think they can relate to those individuals, but that also had to have a good heart, and they can't allow the culture of the police department to dictate their actions. I think that's the main deal. A lot of times officers are normally the only ones in their agencies, and they feel that they have to take on that culture in order to fit in. And I've never been that type. All the years, 26 years of this madness I've been dealing with, and I've never allowed any agency that I work for dictate my action. I'm all for what's right and treating everybody fairly. And I think that's what we need. We need more officers like that. So I just wanted to address that. And
well,
again,
I agree with you with what you were saying, but I think the point that was being made, and I wish we would have had this discussion earlier, because I like to really get in the middle of it, and maybe we can have a part 2 to jump all over it. But I think one of the points that were made is the officers that's out playing basketball with the kids at the videos, the officers that show they're at the Unity March, the officers that's at the Juneteenth parade, that's not the ones that's responding to issues.
that's true.
It's the other officers that's responding to the issues that is causing the problem.
Right.
And I wish more officers heard what you just said.
Yes.
Not to fall into the culture.
Fall into it.
And that's if they did that,
Makes a big difference.
we wouldn't even be on this Zoom today. We would be talking about a whole nother topic right now today. We wouldn't be, and that is to me a cascading message that I wish could permeate, because I deal with it in my profession, that we want the culture of the staff to be in a very positive, helpful, loving way that has structure, versus some of the other stuff that I got to deal with Monday, Friday. And so I do agree. Are there any other points you want to make before we give KJ an opportunity to say a closing statement?
One more point, and I try not to be long, is also the addressing of the dismantle of police organizations throughout the nation. I'm in disagreement with that as well. I'm a firm believer we can't dismantle. We got too much going on. We dismantle police officers throughout the whole nation. With this country being an uproar, I mean, we'll have lawlessness going on everywhere. I'm a firm believer in reform. If we can reform, and I believe you could totally do a whole total restructure of the police department and get it to where it needs to be at. I believe that make everybody start all over and fill out applications, and you just have to change the culture. You have got to make them buy into what police officers should be doing. And so that's pretty much all I have. And I'd like to say again, thanks for having me. And I really enjoyed the conversation. And y'all keep up the good work.
Thank you. KJ.
Just want to start off by saying, I really appreciate these talks. Want to thank Marcus for inviting me and, putting me on game with everybody here and everything. But a lot of the reform goes back to one of the discussions we had before, which is controlling our narrative. Because I think a lot of people are hearing what we're saying and getting a totally different vibe from it. And I think that's what brings up a lot of the debates, you know, about defunding the police or reallocating things and stuff like that. And it's up to us to control that narrative as well, because it's one of the things that we're asking for, which is, you know, the criminal justice reform. We don't need that turned into something else. Just like when Kaepernick kneeled, it was about police brutality, but it was viewed as everything else that it wasn't. But I definitely think that we've hit a lot of heavy points, and we have the right people in here, you know, Judge, the district attorney, and the constable, that are knowledgeable in a lot of these situations that most of us may not, you know, we may scratch the surface on. But, you know, to get an in-depth knowledge, I was definitely enlightened and encouraged. And I know that this could be really expounded on a whole nother level, you know, too. I heard you say, you know, a part 2 about it. You know, I'm all for it. You know, whether I'm a guest or whether I just get to listen, I'm always honored to be able to be enlightened on things that I don't know. Like I said, I could have not just been paying attention in government class, but I think a lot of the things that were spoke on in there. Well, really, in all reality, the first semester, we had a substitute teacher because the actual teacher was on maternity leave. She was about to have a baby. And the sub, I mean, didn't teach us anything. We watched movies, and if we had a test, he said, I don't care what you write on it, just write something and you'll pass. And I mean, there were people writing, you know, lyrics to songs on the test answers, and that's how the first semester went. But I definitely think, you know, political science as a requirement versus something that, you know, if you're not going into that field, you're not really going to think about it, or even, you know, turn your head toward it. But there was a lot of good points, and I'm just honored to be here.
Thank you, KJ. Judge Jones.
Yeah, I want to, man, once again, man, I really had a wonderful time, and I want to thank Just Black, all you guys, for inviting me back. And I really want to stress, or, you know, that we have a part 2. Criminal justice reform is so broad, and I think we was just barely just touching the surface at this stage. But it's necessary, and it's a necessary part of our communities, because that's the one thing that touching all communities. And so I think we need to have a part 2, and maybe if necessary a part 3, because this is beginning to be a big deal when you talk about young folk not going to school. Okay, if you have, how does that affect the single parent? How does that affect the parent that's out here, that's single parent that work 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, and they have a 4th or 5th grader? Now, who's going to stay home and encourage and have that 4th grader or that grade school student to do what they're required to do? So I think school is a very important part. So if not, then we'll probably see a rise and increase in juvenile crime. We'll probably be looking at an increase in adult crime because of those. They feed into each other. So we got to get back to really the basics. Now, I strongly advise those elected officials we have who are running for office during this time, to hold them accountable to do what they say they're going to do. If they're going to but we got to know to challenge them and have them to ask the right people to ask the right questions to get the responses that's going to benefit our community, and so and educate our kids in political science so that they're fully aware. Maybe we should put it in a rap song. Maybe that if we put it in a rap record, maybe some of them will kind of grasp it. But it's definitely necessary. And once again, man, this was very challenging. I enjoyed it. Brothers, y'all can call me anytime. And I'm hoping that there's a part 2 at some point. Had a wonderful time. I enjoyed it. Thank you all for the invite.
Thank you. Nick Navarez?
Yes, sir. Yeah, guys, you know what, I just beat a dead horse, but I do appreciate the invite. I think it's wonderful that this conversation is kind of sparking some other ideas, and I'll be happy to help in any way I can. Not just because I practice law and I enjoy it, but I always feel like criminal justice is, it's very important because you can lose your money, you can go bankrupt and still be okay. But in criminal justice, you can lose your freedom, which is something that's why it holds to me, the gravity of what we're talking about is just so important. I mean, nobody comes to talk to me as an attorney for fun. Something traumatic has happened in their life. And so if we can sit there and get this reform going and talk about it, then I think we're only going to exceed our expectations as a society. And I do appreciate you guys having this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Moderators, Mr. Mack, you got any closing thoughts?
Sure. As always, I just want to say thank you to our guests. I thank you for being a part of just this critical discussion. We need to continue to have these discussions. So Judge, to the constable, to our district attorney, thank you so much for being here. And it's already been said, criminal justice reform is so broad and it means so many things. But one piece of that obviously is the police system in our country. And I just want to say this about law enforcement. I personally am not anti-police. I'm not. But I am anti-police brutality. I'm anti-racial profiling. I'm anti being criminalized just for being Black. So those are the things that are important to me. And we recognize that not all cops are bad. Nobody with any a decent amount of sense, as my great grandmother would say, with the sense God gave a gnat, knows that not all police are bad. But we know that there are a lot of bad police. And there's a system that has been in place for far too long that reinforces those bad police. So that's always been my issue. That's always going to be one of those things that I talk about, as well as we know, like I just said, not all cops are bad, but when one of these cops acts outside of what police are supposed to stand for, I feel there's not enough good law enforcement that speaks up. So that's my issue as well. But I'm not anti-police. I'm not. I'm anti all the bad things that a lot of bad cops do and get away with. So thank you guys, and appreciate all of your input.
Thank you. Marcus?
Just to piggyback on what Mac was talking about, I don't think any of us on this panel is anti-police, but we are anti the things that he mentioned. And I just know that if there's, bad apples, in the regular police department, but there's bad apples in the school department. So whatever we need to do to try to reform, reorganize, retrain, whatever, I think it's something that it's important that we do and not ignore the fact that in any profession that there's people who just don't know how to do their job good. So I think we got to get to a place where we understand that, and once we understand that, then we can put program systems in place that are better for us on the other end. I think right now the system that's in place is better for the police officers end or the criminal justice end, instead of on our end as civilians, as people. We talk about police officers being there to protect. My question is, who are they protecting? So who are they really protecting? That's all I have, Jackson.
Thank you. Myron Sams?
I just appreciate everybody coming out. I think we all recognize that there's some risk involved for our panel guests, having the role that you guys have and being able to speak about unpopular stuff within your respective fields. The fact that you guys were willing to come on and speak about go against the grain with that, I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate Idela's perspective, because we need the people who can speak both sides of that, who can say, like what Max said, no, all police aren't bad, and will have on some level a defense for what she does and for what they do, but also recognize that there are some issues, that there's some stuff that needs to be fixed. Those are the people that we need to be linking up with to make change, because those are the people that will listen. Those cops, we know that there are some cops out there that will not listen to a word that we have to say, but we have one tonight that will stand in the gap, one that can play both sides and argue both sides of the coin. And I think it's a healthy debate. I think it's a healthy discussion that we have to be able to have somebody like Idela who can have a defense for what she does. That's so important, right? I hope we didn't get on here and expect Idela to just ride and die for us when she knows she has a perspective that we don't have. She's seen stuff that we don't see. All we see are probably the negative stories, all the stuff we want to talk about. But Idela can tell you, yeah, it's some jacked up stuff going on our end, and I just appreciate her perspective so much. And I know she understands both sides of the coin. I think we need Idela is the person. People like Idela are the people we need to be having the conversations with, because we know that they are willing to listen. And Judge Jones, I appreciate your perspective. Mr. Nick, man, y'all are way smarter than I am. But we just want to be a part of the movement, of the change, and whatever you guys can do to help us, whatever perspectives you guys can give us to help us see and better understand the other side of it, just like we are helping you better understand the other side of it. I think that's how we all are going to move forward and get to a place where there is truly justice for all. So I appreciate all you guys.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. Marlon, I got the Sims brothers all in a row. That's how they pop up on the screen.
First of all, I apologize. I was kind of being off and on all night. But first of all, I just want to say thank you to all of your guests, all of our guests. You guys are greatly appreciated for what you do. We understand that this is not it's an easy topic for you guys, but we also understand that you guys have jobs to do. You want to be fair and honest. So, and I think that's one of the main reasons why I asked Idela to come in, because I know that she has a great understanding of the African American community, but she also understands her job and she has a unique perspective because she understands both sides very well. So in closing, really all I really want to say is I think it's important to put the right people in the right places, if that makes sense or not, because we try to fix things by just placing a Black person into a situation, but we have to make sure that we are picking the right people that can understand every aspect of the situation. It's probably doesn't help much to put a millionaire into a poor neighborhood just because he's Black and expect him to understand the struggles of the Black community. So I think it's very important to make sure that we're putting the right people in the right places. And also, to close it out, is accountability. We have to hold each other accountable as Black people. And we also have to hold the people that are policing us, that's judging us, accountable too. And that's kind of what I want to end on, just holding each other accountable. That's very important to me. No one's perfect. No one is without fault or without a sin, but we have to be able to hold each other accountable. And I think if you get the right judge, the right police officers, the right teachers, the right legislators, if you get the right people in the right positions at the right places at the right time, I think we can, a lot of the problems that we have can be fixed easily. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Evans, are you there? Coach Evans? There you go. Any closing?
I just want to say thanks to our guests. I know, like I said, to have those conversations and it's real difficult. I know if my profession was under scrutiny as a coach, as a teacher, it would be uncomfortable to talk freely about the things that ail it. But it's helpful and it's healing to talk about the things that can fix it. I think the community appreciates the transparency because we don't get a lot of it from some of our other officials. And so we appreciate you guys being so open, so candid, willing to come on, discuss all the things that are wrong and discuss all the things that can get us better as a country, as a community. So I really appreciate you guys. Thank you. I know you guys got busy schedules. I'm driving, that's why I've been quiet. But I've listened to every word, and I'm excited about things to come, excited about more conversations that'll spark change. I really appreciate you guys, Judge Idella, my man Nick. Thank you guys.
Yeah. Well, I wish there were more people like you four in positions that can impact change at a far greater number, because you guys are outstanding people regardless of the color that you are. And so the communities need more KJs, more Constable Jacksons, more Judge Thomas, and more Attorney Nick Navarrete. They need more of you guys. And one of the things that I really appreciate about today, one is it's a complicated subject because it requires a higher level of expertise. And also outside of just a normal experiences that we've had, either positive, negative with a community or with police officers. You know, one of the things that Judge talked about is the whole economics of the criminal justice system. I mean, that's right up my alley. The issue arises that a lot of people have little awareness of how that impacts the Black community. And so it makes it a very difficult conversation when you're talking about the privatization of prison systems and how that whole funnel gets activated. The whole mental health topic, which is very close to me and a very important topic. And actually you could spend 2 hours on that alone. I think when we wake up in the morning, this is what we're going to have in front of us, because we always say this: we're going to wake up Black, right? Nick going to wake up Hispanic, right? His kids are going to wake up. Our kids are going to wake up Black and Hispanic, right? That's really true. But also, we're going to wake up to there's some very bad people out there, and so we still need some attention on that from police officers. We need growth from the community when it comes to engaging and being educated in all the things that we talked about. When they knowing their rights and not to be combative. You know, that's a lesson I have to teach my son is, sir, Paul, you can't be, you got to comply, son, and then get a phone call to me quick, you know, because my son can end up in not the best position. He will, at some point in his life, he will, just like at some point in my life, I was, right? And my mom and dad had the conversation with me. I have to have the conversation with my kids. I'm in a much better position than my parents was to take care of it. I had a brother that entered into the system very young. He had a very traumatic experience in the system. At his age now, he's pulling out of it. He's doing well, very brilliant, probably the smartest of us all. So I'm very near and dear to that system, and but I really appreciate the panel because I think this platform is for education and awareness. We're not activists, we're trying to educate a community. We're trying to give communities access to people that they need to be talking to and that they need to be seeking out. And I think they need to be knowing, hey, if I'm in some trouble, I know I got to call Nick, if I pick up the phone and call Constable Jackson, I need to ask Judge Thomas a question, or that young man KJ, I might need to ask him some questions, and all of us, because that's what's lacking. The lacking is that we tend to sometimes jump to conclusion when crisis hit us, and then we ends up having a big mess to take care of. But I really appreciate this panel because it's a tough conversation because it's so big, and there's a high level. We actually need that system. Like there's a need for it, right? But what portions of it do we need, and what portions of it needs to change to fit the desires of the community? And at the meeting the other day, I had a really connection to that meeting because that was similar to my community that I grew up in. It sounded almost the same, and in one way it was kind of refreshing. In another way, it was kind of sad that in over 30 years we're still talking about the same thing. Of my 30 years of where I can understand things, we're still talking about the same exact issues. And so when you talk about the economics of that, that is one of the reasons why some things don't get resolved, because it makes money, and so the more educated we are as Black folks, actually, the more educated some of our white counterparts are, we're going to actually realize that, hey, we, as a nation of citizens, we got a system to fix. It ain't benefiting anybody that is working hard every day to make a living. And I'll close with that, and anybody could give a rebuttal to that choose to. Thank you guys very much. It's 8:23, and we probably need to start transitioning to bed like us old people, I'm only a few minutes away from my bedtime. So thank you guys very much. We really appreciate it.
Is that a Mr. Woodgrain t-shirt?
A what?
Is that a Mr. Woodgrain t-shirt
that I'm wearing?
Yeah.
Oh no, well, I got my
UGK. I thought those were UGK.
Yeah, I got that from Mr. Mack there. We've been having an argument about some music stuff. So
and I'm repping our group tonight. Just Black. Get your merch, teespring.com.
All right. Thank you, guys. Go ahead.
Thank you. You have a good night.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.